So it is December 2022. We are well and truly into the Christmas season. Everybody is talking about bells and holly and joyous things, creatures like Santa Claus. If you go into any grocery store, they'll be playing... Well, I don't know what they'll be playing because I always go into grocery stores with my headphones in because I find grocery store PA announcements to be sort of like nails on a chalkboard. You ever think about how public infrastructure, like in airports and things, where they like have announcements going constantly? You ever think about how anti-autistic that is? So it's Christmas and I don't like it and I'm kind of bored of it. So I want to talk about some movies that I watched in October. Halloween, the best time of year, the only time of year, really. Every October for the last 3 years, my friends and I have gotten together to watch at least one spooky themed movie every day of October. It's an exhausting affair that always leaves me with many, many, many thoughts because I watch a lot of movies in that time frame. And I wanted to do a video talking about all of the movies that I watched because I have thoughts about a lot of them. Some of them I have a lot of thoughts on. Some of them I have very few thoughts on. And I figured 2 months late, Christmas time, Halloween, I imagine that there are plenty of trans people like me who want to escape from obligations into a realm where Halloween never ended and in fact never will end. YouTube videos, if you don't know, are timeless and can be rewatched for infinitely. You could just watch this video on repeat until you die, and then Halloween would never be over. Anyway, my name is Sarah Zedek, my pronouns are she, her, and this is the top 30 spooky movies that I watched in October of 2022. And they're not ranked in any order, and I watched more than 30 movies, and this isn't really a best of list. This is just an everything list. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through each one by one. I might say a few words. I might say a bunch of words. The idea is to give you a sense of movies that you might want to watch. So I'm going to try to avoid spoilers where necessary. Basically, I just want to be like, hey, if you want to watch this movie, you want to watch this movie. So don't necessarily come in here looking for complete full reviews. Just going to do some broad overviews, just throw some opinions at the wall to see what sticks, and I leave it to you and your intelligent discretion to arrive at a conclusion about which of these cinematographs that you want to watch in your own free time. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, I love this because we start off immediately breaking all of the rules because we started technically in September. We started on September 30th with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I actually watched a different horror movie that same day, so we're going to start with that one. Super Dark Times is about a bunch of kids. One of them has a samurai sword, and they have a friend that they're sort of forced to hang out with that they don't like, and they get into an argument, and maybe one of them kills that kid, and then the whole movie is their sort of psychological breakdown as the film unwinds. I liked a lot of things about Super Dark Times. All the performers are really good. My frustration with it was I found the first act really dynamic and interesting because it was playing with a lot of just sort of like messy space. It felt a little bit like the perennial go-to teenage boy movie, Stand By Me. I liked that part. Once the plot starts happening, it kind of just falls onto a track and follows that to its conclusion, and it is executed well. But it is sort of like once you get onto that track, a lot of the interesting sort of humanist things that were going on in the early part of the film kind of fall by the wayside. I don't know. I would have liked to see a bit more humanity in that. But Super Dark Times, if you're in for a movie about teenage boys who sort of destroy their lives slowly, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's pretty all right. Then we watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What am I supposed to say about Texas Chainsaw Massacre? You know it's good. It's a good movie. Go watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre if you haven't watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now we're into October, the real spooky month. So we opened up with a double feature of The Blair Witch Project, which I did not watch that day because I had other stuff to do. I think I was actually working on my Tunic video now that I think about it. I did see that in theaters when I was a child, And I cried so much that my dad made me sit through the credits to point at the part in the credits where they say, everything in this movie is fiction and nothing was real. And that, that movie came out in the 90s. I was definitely less than 10 years old. That changed how I viewed cinema forever. It was a very important learning experience. Movies aren't real. Everything is fake. Who cares? I love to stan evil women because they're fake and they didn't do anything to actual real human beings. Lydia Tarr is a feminist icon. After that, we watched We're All Going to the World's Fair, which is a movie about a girl who's doing a internet challenge, a spooky internet challenge that is sort of like an ARG type thing. And it is just a slow psychological portrait of what it's like to be a alienated preteen in the internet age. It feels very much of a piece with Bo Burnham's movie, not Young Adult. That's Jason Reitman. What's the one that Bo Burnham did? The movie that he did about a preteen in the social media age who has a YouTube channel. We're All Going to the World's Fair is one of those movies that after, as I was watching it, I wasn't sure if I liked it, and I found it to be, it's very slow. It doesn't give you anything for free. It's not a movie, it's not like a Paranormal Activity type movie where it eventually resolves into big, explosive, ooh, spooky action stuff. You have to do all the work for yourself, and I found it awesome. Also, it has a cameo from my friend and fellow YouTuber May Leitz, who is in my transitioning videos, been on my podcast a couple of times. Go watch Nick Spheres' stuff. She's great. I came out of it feeling a little bit nonplussed, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. It's one of those that it grows in your mind the more time passes since you watch it. A lot of my favorite movies, I should say, I didn't really like them the first time that I watched them. Which is why I really firmly believe that you haven't really seen a movie until you've seen it more than once. And, there's plenty of movies that I love that I've only seen the one time. That's not a universal maxim. It is a movie that I think it would be very easy to come out of the theater and go, meh, bleh, bleh, and then walk away and then just file that opinion off in a cabinet somewhere where you keep all your bad takes. I think this is a movie that is well worth thinking about. It is upsetting, especially if you've spent any amount of time online, any substantial amount of time online in your adolescence especially, which is probably most of you watching this video, so it will hit a bit close to home. The Wave, 2015. It's a disaster movie. There's going to be a mountain thing where it causes a rock wall to fall into a mountain lake in Norway, and it causes a tsunami that's gonna wipe out the town. It's the sort of typical disaster movie formula of scientist notices trend that everybody else sort of dismisses out of hand, and then he turns out to be right. But I liked a lot about this movie because a lot of times in disaster movies, when there is, the main scientist who's trying to warn everybody and everybody's like, no, it's fine. Especially in a scientific context, it feels a little bit like obnoxious. What I like about this movie is that the science team that is sort of skeptical of him still takes him seriously and are like, all right, fine, we'll run the numbers and we'll see, we'll do this examination, we'll do this, we'll do that. And they do find out, oh yeah, he's correct. And all of that stuff in this movie felt very accurate. I don't know if accurate is necessarily the word that I should use because I have no way of knowing what's accurate. But it feels the way that you would hope scientists actually are, especially when they have the safety of lots and lots of people in their hands as part of their job. The ending kind of sucks. It doesn't suck. It's just sort of, it turns into a pretty stock disaster movie, and I found the sort of locked room drama with the wife at the end kind of meh, a little contrived, a little obvious. It should have been about 30 minutes shorter, but it's still worth watching. It's still a pretty good movie. October 4th, I watched Nope by Jordan Peele. It's good. What do you want from me? It's a good movie. Jordan Peele makes good movies. I don't know what to make of it necessarily. I just think it's fascinating that it's just a movie about a bunch of different things, and it is brave enough to not tell you how they're all related necessarily. There's a lot of stuff in there about Hollywood. There's some stuff in there about taming wild animals. There's also some Evangelion influences. So it's sort of just all over the place, and it works. I don't know. I think people who didn't like it should give it another chance, because it's an interesting movie. These days, if a director is willing to give me a movie that doesn't explain absolutely everything that is in it, I'm willing to give them a lot of leeway, because at this point I feel like we're starting from just absolute rock bottom. The Beast Must Die, 1974. This movie. The Beast Must Die is awesome. It's like Clue, but for werewolves.
One of these 8 people is a werewolf.
It's about a rich guy who has a compound, and he's invited a bunch of rich weirdos from all over the world to his compound that he has rigged with motion detection things all over the property, cameras inside and outside. And his whole thing is, one of you is a werewolf.
One of you is a werewolf.
And I'm gonna find out which one, and then you'll die. And what's awesome about this movie is that it has the werewolf break.
The werewolf break.
But the werewolf break is when all of the evidence has been presented to you as the audience, and they say, and now it's time for the werewolf break. Can you guess who the werewolf is in the next 15 seconds? And so it's just a little intermission where they show you pictures of everybody in the movie. It's such a silly little gimmick. We used to make movies in this country. What did I write in my review of this movie? Yeah, I said every movie should have a werewolf break. I'm using Letterboxd to keep track of my movies. Quick aside, Letterboxd should let you just do episodes of television. I'm really frustrated that it doesn't, because I really want something that lets me log episodes of television that I watch, just because I don't watch a lot of television, and I tend to watch episodes like I do movies, where I'll watch one in a show and then I'll watch the next one the next night. I don't like binge watching. I think it's a bad way to watch shows, and I don't think you can say that you've really experienced a show if you've binge watched it. Maybe that's unfair. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I know there's another one. There's a Letterboxd that's just for TV. I don't want to do it. I don't want another app. I like Letterboxd. I just want to use it. Moving on. She or She or He. I'm not sure how one pronounces it. It's the transgender shoe movie. It's a movie about a shoe that gets gender. It's stop motion. It's bizarre as hell. I loved it. It's so weird. It's so unlike anything I've ever seen. You will never watch anything else like it. That's not going to be the first time I say this about the movies that I watched in October of 2022. Anyway, moving on. October 7th, 2022, we watched Hellraiser, the remake. Should I just read my review? Maybe I'll just read my review and leave it at that. There are a handful of things about this movie that almost work, and if they'd worked better, I might have been able to forgive all the stuff that doesn't. Jamie Clayton is great as Pinhead, but she's in all of 4 scenes? The new Cenobite designs look fantastic, when you can see them, which is extremely rare because they forgot to light most of the sets. The puzzle box is cool. The effects are cool. I'm really happy that so much of this movie involved real things in real places. But the fact that all I can think of in praise of this film is how it compares to other entries in the series is already pretty telling, isn't it? Take away all the things that should be a gimme for a Hellraiser film, and there's really not very much going on in this one. They cast a trans woman as Pinhead, and there's a prominent cis-gay couple, yet somehow this is one of the straightest movies I've ever seen. No one who wrote this movie has had a positive experience with BDSM. No one who wrote this movie has examined their gender identity or questioned their sexuality beyond adolescence. No one who wrote this movie is remotely queer enough to understand the delicate, complex power dynamics that make the Cenobites both scary and appealing. The scary thing about these freaks is that what they do is kind of hot if you're into it. That's what's scary about them, is that it's sort of tempting. It's kind of supposed to be a little bit tempting. I don't know who the characters are, or what their relationships are, or anything. The rich guy is just a rich guy. How did he get his money? In what business does he operate? These details are not strictly speaking necessary to the events of the film, But it'd be nice. It would be nice to know something specific about a character instead of being asked to fill in the blanks of an archetype. You know which billionaire this is, wink emoji. Everyone else was just some 20-somethings. Remember when characters in movies had traits and motivations beyond those that are immediately relevant to the core premise? Remember when movies gave you something, one thing, for the love of God, anything to latch onto? This reminded me so much of the Evil Dead remake. Similar plot contrivance of drugged-out sister unintentionally causes supernatural mischief and sees most of her friends die. Similar sense that the filmmakers had a visceral love of special effects and gore and monsters, and virtually zero understanding of why any of the parts of the movie that don't involve those things should be there, or why a person would want to watch them. Outside of the first act, all the drama is contrived and no one is allowed to have fun. Main lady finds out her boyfriend was paid to use her for Hellraiser things, and she doesn't even get to enjoy killing him. Come on, it's guilt-free. We're cheering. Why isn't she? Or at the very least, let her play with the complexity of that emotion, for God's sake. Yet again, we see a film reacting to the trends of 2010s horror movies by saying, no, we're going to do it right this time, and their definition of right lives exclusively in the portrayal of the aesthetic signifiers which fall undeniably beneath the most broadly defined umbrella of Hellraiser. What about the rest of it, you ask? What about the rest of it? No one goes to horror movies for the stuff that isn't horror. That's what made John Carpenter's Halloween such a classic, because they didn't waste their time defining Laurie Strode as a character and instead went all in on Michael Myers' many thrills and kills to carry the load. I don't know, man, this movie just goes to show that all the diversity in the world doesn't make a single bit of difference if it doesn't extend to the people behind the camera, behind the script. It's not about anything. It's not trying to do anything. It just wants to be a better Hellraiser than the sequels, and in that sense, I guess you could say it succeeded. But a good Hellraiser film would clear that bar so immediately that its existence would be irrelevant. If it were a good Hellraiser film, good enough that it earned its lack of titular enumeration, the question, is it better than the other Hellraiser sequels, would be uproariously non sequitur. There's good stuff here. I want to like it, but the director and writers seem to be on a completely different continent than the production designers. Let them make the movie. I want the John Wick of practical special effects monster movie gore fests, or I want a story about fucked up sex perverts, or I want to see something I've never seen before. But hey, you gotta applaud them for using real sets. That counts for a lot more than nothing. So that was my review of Hellraiser 2022, and I'm not gonna say anything else about it. So, October 8th, I watched Sam Was Here. What was Sam Was Here about? Oh, yeah. This is a movie about a salesman who's sort of lost. Basically, it's this salesman who's going around trying to sell something. And it's very Silent Hill. It's basically a Silent Hill movie, but it's like a really good Silent Hill movie. You know how you say, oh, this movie is Lynchian, and sometimes that means, oh, this movie is trying to be weird, but it doesn't really understand why. And then when it's actually Lynchian, it's like, no, it's like good. It's like Lynchian in the sense of shit happens and it's weird, but it feels meaningful in a way that transcends sort of like ooh so random. It's like dream logic with purpose. And I think the purpose is the part that gets lost in Lynchian stuff. Same thing with Silent Hill vibes. And this felt very Silent Hill in ways that I quite liked. It reminded me of another film that we watched the previous year, Barbarian Sound Studio. What they share in common is that they are both adaptations of, they're feature adaptations of short films. And the trend that we have noticed is that they tend not to have a third act. They sort of forget to finish the movie. So Sam Was Here was great, and it had all this stuff that it was building up to. There was all this really interesting imagery, and then they just don't do anything with it. And then it just doesn't go anywhere. And that's sort of a shame. It just sort of stops. The movie just sort of ends. And it kind of takes its own sort of metaphor too literally by the end, and that's a shame. That's always the problem with a lot of these movies is they're playing with ambiguity, and then it just kind of ends, and it resolves its own metaphor in a really kind of obvious and dumb way. And you know, you gotta leave some ambiguity. You gotta give the viewer something to grab onto. If there's too many answered questions, it just sort of it closes everything off too neatly, and then your brain just sort of slips off of it like water off a duck's back. That's how you make forgettable art. That's how you end up with Blade Runner 2049. Great movie, answers too many of its own questions. Blade Runner, the original, is a legendary classic because it's a bad movie. I don't make the rules, that's just the truth. After Sam Was Here, we watched As Above, So Below. If you watch the trailers, it's a movie about some people who go into the Paris underground and find a portal to hell, and it becomes what's the caving horror movie? It's that movie, but this one. It's the most useless description I could have come up with. As Above, So Below, I went into it expecting to have a really bad time because The Descent is what that movie was called. The Descent was a really bad time. And that's a good movie. That's like a great horror movie, but it's a bad time. I was expecting this to be a bad time, but it is actually just like a Laura Croft story. Oh, we have to get the amulet of Amun-Ra type shit. And that made it kind of fun. I liked how silly it was. It's kind of a silly movie. It's not what I was expecting. I kind of wish it had been more spooky, maybe. And then the ending is kind of a cop-out. The ending that it should have had, I think, is extremely obvious. But they were a little bit too cowardly, I think, at the end, and just sort of gave a happy ending. I don't know. October 10th, we watched Gojira, 1954. What do you want me to say about Gojira 1954? It's amazing. It's one of the best monster movies ever made. Sophie from Mars, who I've worked with on a couple of other things, she did a video recently about kaiju that is quite good, and I recommend watching it. She talks briefly about Gojira 1954, and one of the things she didn't talk about that I think is interesting to think about with this movie is the fact that the other main plot, besides, oh no, there's a Godzilla doing Godzilla things, is that there is a scientist with an eye patch who has developed a super weapon called the Oxygen Destroyer. The background plot is like, how do we convince this guy to let us use the Oxygen Destroyer on Godzilla because it'll destroy all of the oxygen in this area and that will kill Godzilla for reasons. And he doesn't want to use it. He doesn't want to reveal that the weapon even exists because he's afraid that people, that militaries will just be like, ooh, a new weapon for us to use on human beings. That's a really interesting tension. I don't know. It's an interesting movie. There's a lot to talk about with it, and everybody always kind of says some different things once they get past the obvious things. Go watch Sophie's video about it. It's good. Now we're here. This is one of the movies that I wanted to make this video to talk about. Jan Svankmeyer's Faust, 1994. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing Jan Svankmeyer's name incorrectly. I'm an American. What do you want from me? Let me just read you the description of Jan Svankmeyer's... Oh, Jesus. Let me read you the description of Faust 1994. A very free adaptation of Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, Goethe's Faust, and other treatments... Oh, I probably pronounced that name wrong, too. That's going to out me as an uncultured swine. Svankmeyer's Faust is a nondescript man who, after being lured by a strange map into a sinister puppet theater, finds himself immersed in an indescribable weird version of the play, blending live actors, clay animation, and giant puppets. Letterboxd, the word is marionette. Get your facts straight. Faust 1994 is one of the best movies ever made, and I don't understand why it isn't talked about constantly. This is a movie that I watched that I felt like I was insane that I had never heard of. I can't find a good physical release of it in America, in Region A or whatever. It's not in the Criterion Collection. It's not on Arrow. It's not on any of the weird pervert releasers. So it's got a lot of stop motion, a lot of weird practical effects that are just unlike anything you've ever seen. Faust 1994 is one of the best movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know how to describe how interesting it is. It's Lynchian in the good way. It's a movie that you kind of just have to experience for yourself. I read the description of it. It starts off as a movie about a guy getting off a subway and getting a flyer for a production of Faust. And then he goes home and he finds an egg in his bread. Then he goes to where this play is, and it's in an alley, and he finds himself in an alchemist studio. I don't know how to describe this movie. I don't know how to suitably convey to you how good this movie is. All the practical effects are incredible. The marionettes are person-sized, and they look great, and they act great. This movie has a little bit of everything for everybody. It has homeless guys wandering around with severed legs wrapped in plastic. It has marionette heads rolling through beautiful scenic fields. It has about 5 seconds of puppet rape, which is weird, but that happens really fast, and in the context of the scene, it makes sense, and it's fine, and I don't want to do discourse about that, because it's such a small part of the movie. The scene that keeps coming back to me as a great example of why this movie rules, the main guy is sort of like wandered off, and he's out on the street. Meanwhile, the play is going on, and there's this alchemist who's got a book, and he's discovered that if he says this one word, he can summon a devil. And then if he says another word, it sends the devil away. And the devil is a marionette, right? But he's also like a guy in the world, apparently. So our main guy is standing outside smoking a cigarette, and he just sees a guy in a trench coat with a marionette stick sticking up out of the back of his coat. And then like jumps out on the stage and is like, "Brrrra, brrrra." And then the guy banishes the devil, and the devil jumps off the stage. Meanwhile, back on stage, the guy does the summoning word again. So the marionette devil turns around, runs back in, goes through the entire thing of taking off all of his clothes, jumps out and does it just does that for like 5 straight minutes. My girlfriend and I have started like anytime we are talking about devils, which we do often when we're talking about capitalism, we start doing that particular devil sound of like, I'm Jeff Bezos and I'm coming for you. Good luck finding it, but I cannot recommend 1994 Faust highly enough. It is so good. And I might just do its own a video just about it because I like it a lot. Hey, look, there I go, promising more videos that I'm definitely going to make in the future. The Company of Wolves, October 12th, 2022. This film came out in 1984. Directed by Neil Jordan, same director who did Interview with a Vampire film. Company of Wolves is a very strange movie. It teaches some very valuable lessons about unibrowed men. It is a werewolf movie nominally, but it is more a movie about womanhood and social roles, maybe, and monster fucking. Yeah, it's a movie about monster fucking, really. A good video to watch about this is a video about Its Pronouns by Sylvia Schweikert. That's a great video and primed me to really appreciate The Company of Wolves on its own terms rather than bringing into it whatever expectations I had.
Gender is but one of many tools our society uses to exploit us. That continued subjugation is necessary to sustain its exponential growth. This ever-expanding megalopolis encroaches upon the natural world and reduces its wonders to mere resources. Sometimes it feels as if there's nowhere left for the mysteries to hide. But fear not, child of the night, for there are still undiscovered depths where you may find refuge. The harsh light of their world is unable to pierce through the dense cover of these deep woods. The only light this forest has known is the tender glow of the maternal moon.
Where I kind of came down on The Company of Wolves was, if this is not a good movie, then we really should redefine what we call good movies. Like, if this doesn't count, if this is a bad movie by some sort of like, oh, it doesn't really have a plot that makes sense, or it just sort of ends, or it is like a weird poetic kind of flowy movie. It's weirdly paced. It's all of those things. There are so many things you could point at and say, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. This doesn't work, that doesn't work, whatever. But the sum total is still so beguiling and weird and strange. And I just feel like if that doesn't count as a good movie, then nothing does. Because if a good movie is just a movie that makes no technical mistakes, then you're just going to get a bunch of Avengers movies. I am always hungry for movies that are willing to play fast and loose with the nature of reality. And for that, I give it a lot of credit. Weird movie. Go watch it. It's good. The Platform, 2019. This is a movie about guy wakes up in a prison that is two people locked in a cell, and there's just a vertical column that is open, and every day a platform comes down, and it has a whole arrangement of food on it, and people at the very top get to eat first, and it just comes down, and it's sort of a social experiment. It's just like, if people at the top would just not eat so much, people at the bottom would have food left over. It's a very on-the-nose social commentary film that is about as nihilistic as you would expect. I wrote a review of it. I don't know if it's worth reading, but I guess I'll read it anyway. I don't know how much I liked this film. Characterization in the latter third could have been stronger. Frankly, this would have thrived as a 5-episode miniseries. But all that said, I appreciate this film nevertheless as a symbolic portrait of being alive right now specifically. The system doesn't make sense, even to the people supposedly running it. Its cruel injustice churns human meat like butter, and the agony is precisely how little it cares for our suffering. That one suffers in the pit at all is the sufferer's own fault, so it must be yes, because the alternative truth is too horrible to bear, even as you've always known it was true. We all know you make your own doom here. I think it's important when analyzing this film as political allegory to remember that virtually no one alive outside of a scant few nations has witnessed a successful and long-lasting anti-capitalist revolution. This film echoes a feeling I've had quite often these last 6 years, and indeed my entire life, that we are all of us too mired in this hell to greet heaven with open arms, that the grim logic of the machine has made us into machines, and that our love of love has been drowned in the grim hopelessness of the daily grind set. Sometimes the only hope I can muster is that the children who have survived the worst of it will someday take this pain to the source of all our suffering and end it. Is the platform good? I don't know. I guess it depends on what you bring to it and what you want to see. If you want to see a triumphant overcoming, you'll likely be disappointed, but sometimes it's good enough to have that secret doom reflected on the screen. It is nice, at least, to know that I'm not the only one who weeps at the futility of it all. I've been having a really normal time lately. Next up, Halloween Ends, 2022. It's the sequel to the soft reboot of John Carpenter's Halloween. I wrote a whole review of it, but I'm not going to read it because I think it's fairly long. It's pretty good. It's a good first 3/4 of a movie. Red Letter Media has a video about Halloween Ends. I basically agree with everything they say there. It reminds me of Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which is widely understood to be about being a gay man in your teens, sort of coming to terms with your own sexuality and being ostracized. And there's a whole complicated legacy about that. The ending of Halloween Ends is frustrating, and I wish it had done more. I really dislike it when movies, and the new Halloween movies have been doing this a lot, where they go really hard on the idea that evil is a thing that exists in human beings, and that thing is in the suburbs, and it somehow isn't the homeowners. And this movie does start to make some overtures at correcting that. I don't know. This movies all have some really bizarre politics. I don't think that Halloween Ends is saying that we need to kill all neurodivergent people before they kill us, but I don't think it does enough of a good job of saying that that's not what it wants us to take away from the film. It's weird. It's a weird movie. I like most of it. It blows Halloween Kills way out of the water. I was expecting to hate Halloween Ends because Halloween Kills was a miserable, pointless slog that was just politically kind of a nightmare. I'm glad that Halloween Ends is not that. until it gets to the ending, and then it sort of becomes that again. If you're in the mood for a better Halloween sequel, I would say you could do worse. It reminded me of a 90s Halloween sequel a little bit. It reminded me a bit of Halloween H2O, which I really only remember because of the title, and I remember it was a big deal that Jamie Lee Curtis was back for the role of Laurie Strode. I bet you could do a really interesting retrospective comparing those particular sequels. There's a video I'm not going to make. You can have that one for free. We're up to October 17th now. Cure, 1997, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Also directed Pulse. That's right, I'm a Kiyoshi Kurosawa poser. I only know the two of his films that are the most popular in the West. I'm sorry. I loved Pulse. I did a video in 2020 called Prison of Our Own Loneliness that is partially about Pulse. And that was also inspired by the October Movie Fest that I'm pulling from for this video. So that's fun. But Pulse is a great movie. Cure is also a great movie. And it's also a movie that I didn't get at first because I was convinced that it was a spooky ghost movie the whole time. I don't know how I got that in my head, but I kept waiting for that, and I just didn't. I'm usually pretty good at not doing this, but somehow it did not enter into my head that was not the kind of movie that I was watching, and so I just spent the whole time like, well, this isn't the kind of movie that I thought I was going to be watching. When will it become the kind of movie that I thought out of nothing that it was going to be? And then after it was over, I talked about it with my friends and realized, oh, that movie was great. It's a really fascinating movie. I love Kiyoshi. I love the two Kiyoshi Kurosawa films that I have seen because they are horror films that just sort of happen to you, and it feels in the moment like the logic of it doesn't quite make sense. And then you come back to them and it starts to all fall into place. I like a movie that trusts you to put the pieces together. I find that quite admirable in cinema. Watch Cure. It's good. It's a detective story about mind control. Really great sets. I would say Kiyoshi Kurosawa is very good for grimy, ugly, disgusting sets. Every time I watch one of his movies, maybe this is just a thing with J-horror in general, I'm always so captivated by how much texture there is on screen. Something I really miss in modern cinema, digital cinema in particular, is just how often we just shoot in rooms like this. I know I've got my walls covered, but just sort of here's the beige walls. I love it when a room is just sort of covered in stains and grime, and it's made out of industrial steel for some reason. It just looks bizarre. I love it. I love it when a location feels like a real place, and I wish that more movies did that. Next up is Throwdown. It's not a horror movie. It's just a movie that I happened to watch in October. Throwdown is a movie about how judo is the universal love language, and that there is no insult too insulting, no debt too great, no personal slight so immense that a good, solid round of judo cannot resolve it. I think the best way to describe Throwdown is that in this universe, judo is the closest thing that men can have to sex with each other, and it's beautiful. And I love it, and you should watch Throwdown. It's a fun movie. Whoa, what's going on? Oh, did you think that this was the end of the YouTube video? No, this is the midway point of the YouTube video, but the second part is elsewhere. And you're going to have to wait for it, unless you give me money. If you want to see the rest of the video that I made, why not go to patreon.com/LTAS or camaraderie.co/Sarazedek to give me as little as $5 or $10 or $15 or $20 or however much many dollars that you want to give to me. Speaking of whom, I'm going to take a minute to thank my $10 a month supporters. Rubeline, Scott Olson, Prum, Skyplayer, Jay Jorts, Chthonic Syzyges, Joe Somebody 2, Kate Shrike, Vriska Zone, Catherine Jibes, Mad Figs, L Something, Duchess, Patrick Feeney, Emma Sylvia, Evan Ritchie, Bobby Jane DeForge, Pinball Witch, Natalie Watts, J Mac D, Susie Miniike, JB Silbanary Wolf, Athiet, Bellicose, Anarcho Duck, C. Hoover, Drakenlupin, Anaphylaxis, Jane the Human, Quirk, Richard Dunbeck, Halsey, Cam Chacon, Dick Beninia, Optimistic Duelist, Z, and Robin. You know how they say the first taste is always free? Well, if you like the first half of this video, you're gonna love the second half, but you're not going to be able to watch it for a hot minute. I'm not going to release it on this channel publicly until after Christmas sometime, probably, I don't know, the day after, whatever the nearest Friday to Christmas is. I'm not looking at a calendar right now. You couldn't pay me to look at a calendar. You couldn't threaten my life to look at a calendar. I've never even seen a calendar ever. If you want to see the rest of this several weeks before everybody else on planet Earth, then you should go to patreon.com/LTAS or camaraderie.co/Cerezetic and give me some money. $5 supporters get access to my notes and scripts and various unused materials, lots of behind-the-scenes footage. I have a whole huge playlist. It's just a private playlist for patrons. Just give me some money on the internet, and you can see all of that stuff. I also have a Ko-fi for one-time donations. It's ko-fi.com/Cerezetic. Please support people who make things that you like. You don't have to support me if you don't want to, but you should give your money to some independent artist. Stop using Spotify. Stop using Netflix. Pirate everything. Find me on Twitter at HMSNoFun. You can find me on co-host at Cerezetic. You can find me on Mastodon at Cerezetic at Shrike.club. You can find me in your neighbor's house if you look hard enough. You can find me in the ocean if you say my name 3 times into the nearest conch shell. You can find me in a loaf of bread if it's sourdough, and if it's the one that's in my house that I'm gonna open up as soon as I'm done recording this video to make myself a sandwich. Am I making a me, like am I making a me sandwich? Is that what I was implying? Links to everything I talked about in the description, to all the videos that I mentioned in the description. Go watch those. Go watch some movies. Watch more movies. Watch a bunch of movies. Just watch movies. I can't highly recommend enough the activity of simply watching a movie. Just pick a movie, watch it blindly, don't know nothing about it, just go in and watch it. Highly recommend this activity because I think you will find the hesitation you feel about watching movies and the indecision. A lot of that is just because you don't want to waste your time. And if you just put on a movie, you'll realize, oh, I like watching movies. Or you'll realize, oh, I don't like watching movies. And then you'll stop watching that movie and maybe you'll put on something else. Or maybe you'll go play Minecraft. I don't know what you do with your free time.